Hello. Welcome to Torah for today, March 25th, 2024, with our scholars today joining us in the circle of Jewish learning. We're going to go to, we're going to talk about Passover in the sense of, here's the question. Why can't we eat chametz for the 7 days or 8 days of Passover? Right? It's one thing to eat matzah at the meal, but why do we have to avoid the chametz itself for those 7 days? As a reminder, what is chametz? Things we can't eat on, right, George, on Passover.
Right.
George, how do you define what's chametz?
Okay, are we going to talk about it's more pure or something? Are we going to go that way or
Just chametz. How do you define what you can't eat?
the dough has risen, type stuff. You're baking something and it
Dough. So the dough has not risen. Which grains can be chametz?
5 grains.
well, there's seven, I think. No, how
There's
five?
5.
Okay.
Wheat, barley.
Yeah.
Right. Wheat, rye, barley, spelt, and oats.
No,
I think spelled, if I remember, whatever that is.
Yeah. There's another term for it. Farro. I forget what it's. There's another.
But there are some grains or things which are questionable, Sephardic and Ashkenazic, like quinoa, corn, or whatever.
Right. So those aren't technically recognized as grains.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, quinoa, for example, is not one of the forbidden grains.
Yeah.
The other ones what you're thinking are defined as ketniot.
Okay.
Defined as legumes, and that's corn and beans and certain types of rice, of course.
Green beans are okay, Ashkenazic wise, I believe.
There's certain ones that are not, in terms of peas that are formally, because by the way, you could make pea bread, some are saying. Anybody know why those are forbidden in the Ashkenazic tradition?
Well, Sephardic, because they're eating rice. I mean,
but why?
They're a little more lenient.
No, well, by the way, it's not that they are more lenient. The Ashkenazim were actually more stringent.
No, I mean Sephardic in that sense was more lenient.
Yeah, but here, George, it's an important distinction. It's not that they're lenient. It's that the Ashkenazim forbade something they didn't have to forbid.
Because it could be.
Yeah, the Ashkenazic is stricter.
Yeah, it's not even, George, it's not even strict. Like they didn't have, in fact, in some medieval commentaries, it's called shtuyot.
Yeah.
It's called nonsense.
Right.
So the question, George, is why is it the Ashkenazim made it more stringent? Right? Why did they? Judy, do you have any idea?
Gil said because they ferment.
So there are some who say that you can make bread out of those things.
Yeah.
You can make rice bread, you can make pea bread, you can make corn bread, you can make a lot of things because it can be something that you could make into a bread. Right. But most likely it comes from the Middle Eastern marketplace. Okay. Where you have these large bags of grain. How many of you have been to those, the burlap sacks, and you stick it and you do it? Well, in that area, George, in addition to the 5 grains, you have rice and corn and everything else. So the best theory that I know of is because even 1 grain of a grain can make something not kosher Passover, is they just made all of them forbidden for Passover.
Okay.
They don't have to be, right? So that's the best explanation I can have. The conservative movement, by the way, has leaned against being, removing for many people the Ashkenazic tradition. I myself, by the way, have corn, rice, and legumes. So I'm a Sephardi at heart. And I do love the Persian and Sephardic traditions. All right, we're going to go to our study guide. Let me get it up there. And the first one that we're going to be reading, the source is going to be from the Haggadah itself. And let's see, Eileen, would you like to start reading?
Okay.
Um, Pesach Haggadah, Magid HaLachma Anya 3.
Right. So that's right. So this is the from the Passover Haggadah, of course. This is the Magid, the section of telling. Halachma Anya. This is version 3, but this is the bread of affliction. Go ahead, read it.
This is the bread of affliction, poverty that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Anyone who is famished should come and eat. Anyone who is in need should come and partake of the Pesach sacrifice. Now we are here. Next year we will be in the land of Israel. This year we are slaves. Next year we will be free people.
All right. So let's. By the way, I forgot to recite for us to recite the blessing. Let's do last Soka Divrei Torah. Then we'll take this apart together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kirsham mitzvotav v'tzivanu lasok divrei Torah. Amen. All right. So what is so comments or questions about this section of Halachma Anya? First of all, what language is it in?
Aramaic.
It's in Aramaic. How do you know that, George?
Well, first of all, a lot of words end in aleph, which is
Correct
in Aramaic.
Good.
So, and also a lot of things start with a dalet, which means of, like di Mitzrayim.
Good.
You know, things like that.
Absolutely. So, and by the way, a final nun rather than a final mem.
Yeah.
So if you ever want to know, Judy, like how you see all the words that end in an aleph?
Yeah.
Judy, do you see that? Right. If you see, Steve, that's how you know. In Hebrew, it's most commonly a hey. Yeah. In Aramaic, it's an aleph. And so if you look at the Kaddish, Mourner's Kaddish, or every Kaddish, it's Aramaic. It also has alephs at the end.
Also the word ba'artza, ba'ar'ah, instead of artsa.
Correct.
They exchange the
That's right. The Sadi and the Ayin. No, that's right. There's a number of little changes that are correct. They're sister languages, of course. All right. Comments about the Halachma Anya. The bread of affliction, lechem oni, Anya is the Aramaic. Their ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. So they ate it when they were in Egypt. Anyone who's famished should come and eat. Anyone who's in need should come and partake of the Pesach sacrifice. The rabbis point out that there's two different people. So this is an important part if you don't know. This is where they would open up the door and invite people to come in and participate in their Seder. Before we opened it for Elijah, this was the original place to open it. And Eileen, you were supposed to go out, and the language that people understood, Aramaic, right? And say, all who are hungry, come on and eat. All who are needy, come inside. What's the difference between hungry and needy? How would you, if you wanted to talk about different types of people you're inviting in, what type of need might they have?
Just to be with other people.
Oh, Eileen, very nice. Just to be with other people. That's great. All right. Other possibilities. Stan, did you have one?
Well, I was going to say lonely, which is the same thing.
Okay. All right. Good. Steve?
But needs in life, could be anything.
Good.
All of us have needs of one kind or another.
A roof over their head.
Just to get out of the cold. Just to get out of the, very nice. So whether you're coming in to eat, or by the way, if you just want to come in for a Passover meal, the Seder experience. So when you invite somebody, it's not just because, they want to participate in a Seder and to fulfill that mitzvah. It could be just because they want to eat or that they need a roof for whatever it is. So it's a wonderful idea. Good. Then look at the next part. Now we are here. Next year we'll be in the land of Israel. What's that supposed to mean?
Well,
George?
Well, then combining with the next part, Lashana Haba'a B'nai Chorim. Next year we'll be free people. Well, we're free people in the United States, so it's got a bigger meaning, being free. Maybe disposing of things you shouldn't be doing. That you're obsessed with or doing, that you're not free from things. And next year we're going to be in Israel. Well, probably most of us won't, although we can be. In the past, maybe you couldn't, but now get on an airplane, So it's got a different meaning,
all
more
right,
Jewish, more.
So George,
Yeah.
the meaning of being in Israel, like here, and by the way, at the end of the Seder, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim,
Yeah.
what's the meaning of that? It's the Messianic era, George,
Oh, okay.
right? There's a hope for Messianism.
Yeah.
And by the way, during Passover, traditionally is a time that the Mashiach would come. That's why we welcome Elijah as well at the end of every Shabbat. And ultimate freedom will be in a Messianic era.
Okay.
All right, so this is halach ma'anya. The most important part for our study today is this is called the bread of affliction. And by the way, to note that they ate in Egypt. So we're going to get to that in a moment. All right, here's another section. Eileen, why don't you read this from Exodus chapter 12, verse 15.
Okay, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the very first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day to the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel.
All right, so you're not supposed to have any leavened bread during those 7 days. Yep, Stan?
We actually remove it before the first day.
Yeah.
All right, that's been our tradition. It says on the first day remove it, but we remove it first, before the first day.
Right.
So when do we officially remove it? Is the morning of the holiday?
Yeah.
Is when they would remove it and burn it. We have this tradition now of the night before of finding the chametz, right? What we call bior chametz. And the next day, Stan, they would burn them, right? You take it out to bonfires and you would burn whatever little chametz you had. Remember, they didn't have lots of leaven products, right? Where
Some people clean with a feather.
yes. So the tradition was to do it with a feather, and you would find and you put the chametz in different places around. You had to remember where it was, and you took it and you used a feather, something very fine like a brush, to be able to do it. But here it's very clear that 7 days, Judy, you can't eat chametz. You can't eat any leaven products.
Mhm.
Right? So the question is why? Let's go on. Nancy, you want to read from Exodus chapter 12?
You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout the ages as an institution for all time.
So we have to observe, Nancy, from the very beginning, right? Exodus chapter 12 is when they left Egypt. And even before they leave, this is going to be an institution for all time. Right? Observing a Passover Seder and of not eating chametz. Judy, question or comment?
I always get bugged by stuff like you shall be cut off from Israel. And I don't know what that means.
To be cut off?
I mean, you're not a Jew anymore. You're not.
Karet meant that you were excommunicated. Yeah, you're Jewish, but you were cut off from community and you had no relationship with community. It's kind of like in certain groups where they do it now, in the Amish, right? Once you make the commitment after the Springen, right? What do you call that?
When they go out and then come back.
Yeah, they come back at the end of the year. But if you never come back, Eileen, you're not excommunicated. But if you do come back, but then violate the tenets, then you're excommunicated.
Well, at least this time they didn't say you'd be killed.
Correct. Well, yes, that is true. Let's go on. Nancy, continue. This is Rashi, right? Biblical commentator in the 11th century. Go ahead.
You must be vigilant regarding the matzah, so that they not come to be leavened. Rabbi Yoshia said, do not read it as matzah, but rather matzahs.
As
Just
mitzvahs.
oh, mitzvah, sorry. Just as we do not allow the
Matzah.
matzah to leaven, so we do not allow a mitzvah to leaven. Rather, if the opportunity comes to you, do it immediately.
Right. Look at this word. Look, Nancy. Here, if you see, I'm going to show you the Hebrew a little bit. Ushmartem et, this word, the third word here, depending on how you pronounce it, can be hamatzot or mitzvah or mitzvot.
Oh,
the same letters. The same letters.
Oh.
Steve, isn't that creative? But now, what does that mean when they say, don't let mitzvahs become leavened? What does that mean?
No.
George, go ahead.
Well, it's like one of the mitzvahs is a bris, and you try to do it immediately, early in the day. You try to, as soon as you can. If you wanted to put on tefillin, as soon as the sun comes up, you would, to really not let it leaven.
Right. So here, leaven just means to delay.
Yeah.
Because that's what leavening. By the way, leaven. Many people are confused by the fact they'll say like, "Oh, you need yeast in order to have leavened bread." No, you don't. If you just put dough like wheat, flour, and water together long enough, it will become leavened. Which is why hello, Gil, good to see you. Which is why, by the way, from the time the water touches the flour until it comes out of the oven, 18 minutes. It's not about the relationship to chai, by the way. But that's all it can have. You're done. After 18 minutes, that's the limit of leaven. Gil, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that bread up until the late 1890s was all sourdough, which was just from bacteria from the air. And that yeast was actually invented by the Fleischmann Jewish brothers. Yeast only began in use around the 1900s. So leaven did not involve yeast before that.
Correct. So thank you. The idea was that just the longer you had together, the more that it would rise. And I was thinking of something else about, are flour tortillas leavened? Ask Gil. Gil, is a flour tortilla considered a leavened bread?
Yeah, well, if it's less than the 18 minutes, then yeah.
Wouldn't it? So you'd think, but here's but it's not. So here's what's forbidden. And George Hametz, how I define it is any of the 5 grains that are first not made into matzah. Right? That because now it explains, George, also wheat vinegar.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't rise, but vinegars are forbidden. Anything that of the 5 grains that first isn't made into matzah.
You could have vinegar from apple cider.
Of course you can. Of course you can. What I'm talking about, George, is why is vinegar leavened?
Nope.
No. So why would it be forbidden? That's why the term chametz can be very confusing. Bob.
Yeah, I was just going to say vinegar itself is a fermented product, isn't it?
It is fermented. And then the question is that leavened, is it the same way? Is it the same definition of something that becomes leavened or not? It is fermented. But so here's why for me it's just easier. Anything that is not first made in the form of matzah is forbidden. And for example, you can't have flour in your house even to make matzah. All the matzah has to be made before Passover. Any of the grains, it all has to be gone. So Bob, you make a good point about it's at least fermented, but anything really, is not permitted. Gil, you have another addition?
Have what?
You're going to add something on it, or are you just listening? Okay. But that's why this whole notion of chametz and with the fact we can't eat it. And so they're trying to find meaning in the idea of the leavening part. And so they say, Rashi says, it's like the mitzvot. That's what you shouldn't tarry to do mitzvot. All right, let's go back to, because we have a long section at the end. If we're going to get to it, we'll see. Exodus 12:39. Let's see. Judy, you want to read? Come on.
Okay. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had taken out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, since they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves.
So, Judy, we have this tradition, and many people, and it's part of the Haggadah, that says that the reason we have unleavened bread is because they left. When they left Egypt, the dough didn't have time to rise. You know that story. But the truth of the matter is, and we're going to get to it, they had matzah, they ate it in Egypt. Right? I talk a lot about that, Steve. But we're reenacting that meal in Egypt the night that they left, where they had matzah, maror, and the Pesach offering. All right, let's go now to the Mishnah Pesachim. I love this segment. By the way, the 10th chapter of the tractate of Pesach or Pesachim is all about the Seder, the 10th chapter. And here it goes. So I want you to know, this goes back to about the year 200, and in which we have some descriptions about what that Seder is beginning to look like. Judy, why don't you read this, Mishnah number 5? You have to unmute though. Oh, there you go. Got it.
Rabban Gamliel used to say, whoever does not mention these 3 things on Passover does not discharge his duty. And these are they: the Passover offering, matzah, and maror.
Good. And that may sound familiar, Judy, because that's part of the Haggadah, right? Yeah. When we get through the storytelling, Steve, and we get through the 10 plagues, right? The taking the wine after Dayenu. We read this part, Rabban Gamliel, that's exactly as it is here. Continue, Judy.
The Passover offering, because God passed over the houses of our ancestors in Egypt. Matzah, because our ancestors were redeemed from Egypt. Maror, because the Egyptians embittered the lives of our ancestors in Egypt. In every generation, a person must regard himself as though he personally had gone out of Egypt. As it is said, and you shall tell your son in that day, saying, it is because of what Hashem did for me when I came forth out of Egypt.
So you can recognize, Judy, right? The 4 sons, rather, that are going to come out of this. Mm-hmm. And the obligation of having matzah and maror. Here's a slightly different version of it. Bob, would you like to read, please? Oh, you have to unmute, though. Yeah.
Pesach Haggadah Magid Rabban Gamliel.
That's just letting you know where the source come from. I apologize. Go ahead.
Rabban Gamliel was accustomed to say, anyone who has not said these 3 things on Pesach has not fulfilled his obligation. And these are them: the Pesach sacrifice, matzah, and maror. This matzah that we are eating, for the sake of what it is, for the sake to commemorate that our ancestors' dough was not yet able to rise before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he, revealed himself to them and redeemed them, as it is said, and they baked the dough which they brought out of Egypt into matzah cakes, so it did not rise, because they were expelled from Egypt and could not tarry. Neither had they made for themselves provisions.
All right. So why did we eat matzah in Egypt?
Why did we?
Yeah. Why were the Israelites, right? The maror is about the bitterness that they had. Mm-hmm. Okay. The Pesach offering, which, by the way, was probably the killing of one of the Egyptian gods, which was the ram. But why? Now, by the way, matzah is not invented. When do we have matzah in the Torah before this?
You don't.
We do.
We did, yeah.
But the Egyptians ate something very similar to that.
Okay, so you're looking historically, Eileen, which you often do, and that is correct.
I'm sorry.
No, 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 don't apologize. Every
Was it
culture,
in
hold on, George,
Bereshit, wasn't it?
George, wait,
Okay.
give me a second, please.
Okay.
I just want to help Eileen understand
Okay.
that there are many civilizations that have, like tortillas. Every culture has this basic, very quick kind of bread that's made. All right, so George, now where is matzah
Was
mentioned?
it Abraham, I think, with the
There's
stranger?
a story with,
Yeah.
right, with Lot, I think, and
Oh,
Abraham.
Lot.
And right,
Okay.
which one time it's used, the word matzah, and another time it's just where Abraham tells Sarah to make cakes, which we assume they were going to choose to make quickly. But you're right. So Eileen, the word matzah is not first used in Exodus. We find it used as a quick preparation of bread in Genesis even. So now, why, according to what we just read, maybe, what would be, I mean, we talk about it being the bread of affliction, the bread of poverty, because you have to do it quickly, right? You make it, but according to this, why, if we were told, if the reason given, because the dough didn't have time to rise, what could it mean that we ate it in Egypt? Yes, Bob, go ahead.
Well, let me pretend to be Eileen for a minute.
Good.
Good.
There was no refrigeration in ancient Egypt. There
Okay.
was no way to preserve bread as we know bread. And so it makes perfect sense to make a matzah because God knows matzah doesn't go stale.
Well, that's so interesting, right? You might think it would travel better,
Good point.
but the reason given is that it didn't have time to rise is because they left quickly. So here's what I would suggest, and it's a little bit hard here to understand, I think, is that in foreshadowing and anticipation that they were going to leave quickly, that they ate matzah as a symbol, Bob, that of how quickly they were going to have to leave.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so why is it important how quickly they left? Why does matzah then, if that's a symbol of the Exodus, why is the quick departure so important?
Well, Pharaoh had a habit of reversing his decision.
Ah,
We had we believed we had a narrow opening of opportunity.
all right. So good. So that fits in with the narrative. Good. Anybody else? Stan, did you have a suggestion? No. Okay, George, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with all that's been said, but if you're going to prepare a lamb, that's going to take a long time. So if we got 18 minutes to prepare matzahs, but how long would it take for this lamb stuff? I mean, there's an incongruity there.
So I love that, and I love that symmetry, George, of the fact that the sacrifice, they had to offer the sacrifice. They sat around eating that for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of beef.
Absolutely.
There.
Good. So what's the role? What's the matzah supposed to teach us about then? Exactly.
Okay.
Eileen.
I just think that if you were slaves and you had to eat fast before somebody got on your case. So that way it never rose. And that it was something that they had to eat fast all the time.
So George, one possibility is that the sacrifice represents really the freedom, right, Eileen, of being able to eat and take your time and service to God.
Yeah, by the way.
Hold on, George. And the matzah, Eileen, would then symbolize the enslavement, right? That you have to do things very quickly.
Yeah.
Also, if they killed the goat, at ram, whatever, for the blood, what did they do with the animal? Did they have enough time to cook it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They could. Yeah. They cooked it. They sacrificed it, Eileen, and they ate it that night before they left. Yes, 100%.
You're supposed to. Again, I like the symbolism. Got to go fast in the matzah, but then we're told that we got to lean. It's different from other nights. It's like a Roman banquet the way that
correct.
Set up.
Those rituals come later because it becomes. It eventually, George, is transformed and morphs into this luxuriant Roman repast. Yes, you are right.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on because there's a lot more material here. So hold on. let's keep going. All right. Let's Kathleen, you want to read? All right, this is from Exodus chapter 13:3.
And Moses said to the people, remember this day on which you went free from Egypt, the house of bondage, how the Lord freed you from it with a mighty hand. No leavened bread shall be eaten.
Okay, so again, we have another source. It says about during Passover, you don't eat the leavened bread. All right. Let's go on. Emek hadavar, you shall not eat chametz. This is a commentary. Go ahead.
You shall not eat chametz. I commanded you not to eat the chametz in order to root the awareness of this idea in the heart through some action that teaches and reminds us. Matzah does not benefit from the stratagems of human hands to rise the dough any more than bread and water, which were created by the Blessed One.
So it doesn't take, right? This is a natural process of being with God, Kathleen. Right? It's the basic ingredients of, if you will, of oneness with God without human intervention. It's what, Judy, what we talked about before with Gil, there's no yeast involved, there's no anything, like nothing involved. It's simplicity. Kathleen, you're going to go on. I wrote a note here, commentary. It's 1872. I had never heard of this commentary before. And so from Poland in 1872. And I underlined part of the significance of it. So go ahead, matzah.
Matzah, a remembrance of history and a symbol of hope. This is like the bread of poverty which our ancestors ate. As we begin the Haggadah, we do so by emphasizing the power of God. Matzah serves as a symbol of memory. When we refer to the bread of the affliction, we are reminded that despite the fact that Pharaoh was so powerful that no slave ever escaped from Egypt, we were able to do so. Now we are here in a place where God's face is hidden. Next year in the land of Israel, where God's providence will be revealed.
All right, so George, that's how, in this very beautiful spiritual understanding of what it means to be slaves this year and in the land of Israel next year. Right? It's a beautiful kind of spiritual understanding. Keep going, Kathleen.
Okay.
Second line. This is a
reference to Deuteronomy 31:17. Then my anger will flare up against them, and I will abandon them and hide my face from them. And they shall say on that day, surely it is because God is not in our midst that these evils have befallen us. Now we are slaves, next year free, each person underneath his vine and fig tree. We can only be free when we recognize the power of God. Matzah alludes to the power of renewal. With almost nothing, we make matzah. God renews the world ex nihilo, out of nothing, just as the bread of affliction is made without leaven to begin its preparation. The preparation of matzah, however, begins with something, flour. Human beings cannot really create something out of nothing.
All right, does everybody, Steve, like this is getting very esoteric now. Right? The idea is creation ex nihilo, creation from nothing, only God can do. And so when we're making matzah, if you will, we begin with something. We begin with flour. And so in the spiritual moment of making matzah and in the simplicity of it, without much else, we still acknowledge the creative force of God. Right? That's what this commentary is sharing. Kathleen, keep going, please.
From the matzah, then, we are made aware that God is all-powerful and has the ability to reward or punish. When this idea is firmly in our hearts, then we will be in the land of Israel and we will be free. For there is no real redemption like the liberation of the mind, and there is no exile as complete as an imperfect intellect. Wow, that's good. One is free when one's desire for material possessions is sublimated to his intellect, and one's intellect surrenders to God.
All right, so what does it mean to be enslaved here? And what is
We have
liberation?
to liberate our minds from slavery. We have to free ourselves from our attachments in the world that prevent us from focusing on God.
Ah, Kathleen, that's beautiful, right? There are things in this world, whether it's things or money, whatever those things, which we become attached to. We get focused on them. And when we do that, we lose that relationship with God. All right, keep going. This is some very powerful stuff. So keep going.
For there is no, oh, I said that.
One is free.
One is free when one's desire for material possessions is sublimated to his intellect, and one's intellect surrenders to God. Each person is obligated to see himself as if his intellect went out from the exile of foolishness and materialism. That is why we say,
And that's why we say the halach ma'anya.
okay.
So what is Passover ultimately in this sense trying to teach us about the world, about ourselves, about enslavement and redemption?
That we can be enslaved to anything. It's not, and we are enslaved to things in our culture sometimes, and then we have to remember to liberate our mind from that.
It's beautiful. We can be enslaved to ideas.
Yeah. We can be enslaved to our jobs. We can be enslaved, to an addiction, anything.
And it's hard to free yourself from that enslavement. And remember, how hard is it to free oneself? Of the Israelites who were in Egypt, right? How many, any ideas how many did not leave?
A very large percentage.
2/3, wasn't it?
No.
There's
Okay.
one suggestion.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, George, go ahead.
I have a big problem with this. They say 4/5. However, the males 20 and over in Bamidbar 603550, starting with 70, not that long before. I mean, to get even to that number, which is about 2 million people, to me, I've got problems. Now to get
if you want to take it literally, if you want to take it, George, if you want to take the Torah, that literally and the whole Torah, you've got more problems.
Okay, well, we're only focusing on this one here.
I'm just saying, if we want to start going there, and Eileen will have a good time with you about taking things literally. Yeah. But yes, but George, but I want to go back.
That's a midrash, so it's not in the Torah that is 4/5 didn't show up.
Where did it come? It does it's a hint in the Torah where it says they came out hamushim. And the word there, hamushim, they debate, like one translation is they came out armed, but they're not sure. Bob, the other thing is hamushim, hamesh, 1/5, only 1/5 came out.
Okay, yeah.
4/5 did not, which is, from the rabbi standpoint, this interpretation is talking about how hard, Kathleen, it can be to liberate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? People, whether it's like people just get comfortable with life. By the way, people, I mean, I don't know about you, in my role as a rabbi, all the time, I talk to people who hate their jobs and who feel enslaved to their jobs and can't leave, even though they know that they should for themselves.
Right.
Right? When you just get used to something. By the way, bad marriages. You deal with people who they're in bad marriages and they should be getting divorced for lots of different reasons, but they can't because they get used to something. And that's the problem with enslavement, is we often get used to it. Stan, go ahead.
I was going to say that not all the stories in the Bible that we read are difficult if you try to say logistics in that time when we're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of people. It's just that couldn't be the way that we see those stories today. But as far as leaving in haste and leaving and taking the stories for some, let's say, personal aspects, what does it mean to me? What can I learn from it? That makes more sense than saying, what really happened, how many really left, how many did this or that or the other thing. It's always a problem.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to go back so we can finish. And with apologies, I'm noticing that something was not put through. So this next section is we're missing some pages, and that's my apologies. I gave it was two-sided, and my assistant didn't see it. I'm going to read the first part, and then I'm going to get to this with the help of God. And this is from a commentary. Matzah, a remembrance of history, a symbol of hope. This is like the bread of poverty, which our ancestors ate. As we begin the Haggadah, we do so emphasizing the power of God. Matzah serves as a symbol of memory. When we refer to the bread of affliction, we're reminded that despite the fact that Pharaoh was so powerful that no slave ever escaped from Egypt, we're able to do so, and this will continue with the help of God. All right. Who has, Steve, you haven't read yet, have you? Why don't you read? Matzah teaches us.
Matzah teaches us that we could not have escaped from Egypt on our own. Other people would have taken credit for their escape, but the bread of affliction is a reminder that we were powerless on our own. When we contemplate the meaning of matzah, which our ancestors ate and through which our ancestors merited God's blessings, we affirm that the hand of God is all-powerful, the creator of light and darkness. Matzah is not the food of slavery, but an affirmation of God's providence, the one who creates the rich and the poor.
Right, Steve? So it's an attempt to change that idea about lechem, meaning the bread of affliction, to a very different understanding of what matzah is about. And this one now, that all who are hungry, go ahead, therefore.
Therefore, all who are hungry, come and eat. We invite the needy to come and eat with us, even though the sages tell us that the poor are often humiliated by their poverty. Having contemplated the meaning of the matzah, we now say to them, don't be ashamed. What we have is not ours. Everything comes from God. We are eating at the table of the merciful one. Even though you are now in great distress and need, your lowly state is meant to raise you up so that you can accept God's exalted inheritance.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
The idea is that we're not elevating ourselves, but rather when people come in, we are elevating them to understand that, look, whatever we have, it's a lot of blessings involved, a lot of good luck and fortune, a lot of hard work, but a lot of other things go into that as well. Keep going.
All who are in need. We should invite not only those who are hungry, but those who do not have the means of celebrating and honoring the festival.
Right.
Come and celebrate Passover. We invite him to come take whatever he needs to celebrate the holiday, for he and we are the same. One should speak gently to a needy person. Say to him, consider this. Has any creature created something from nothing? Can one create fullness out of emptiness? Surely God can make the dejected feel secure and raise up those who have faltered.
All right, so this is not going to be, this is out of order. Let me see something. Yeah, it's not, hold on, I'm going to take this off here. And with apologies, it just ended up out of order. In terms of matzah now, let's go back and we're going to finish up our discussion about 7 days. Why in diaspora 8 days? So what should the not eating of chametz? By the way, you don't have to eat matzah, Steve, except for the Seder. You don't have to eat it for the rest of Passover. Just so you know, you can't eat bread, but you don't have to eat matzah.
Right.
Matzah, and by the only time you recite the blessing, the mitzvah al achilat matzah is at the Seder. What prayer do we do over matzah when we eat it during Passover when it's not the Seder?
Motzi lechem.
Yeah, it's regular lechem. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's still the grain that came forth from the ground. So the idea is, so why can't we have chametz during these 7 days? What lesson, what experience are we supposed to have?
I would think that this is how we identify with our ancestors. That's how I think of it.
Okay, good. Very good. Anybody else? Like, why would you argue? Because there are some people, by the way, Steve, today there are Jews, many Jews, who, aside from, the first day of Passover, eat bread for the rest of, Passover. There are.
Yeah.
And yet the chametz, not refraining from it for the 7-8 days, is supposed to be itself a lesson. So what would we say is that lesson?
Limits.
Maybe it's about the cycles of life and the cycles of freedom, because we have the cycle of 7 days of the week. We have a cycle of enslavement, and we have a cycle of freedom. And it's to remind us that we have to work to maintain that freedom. That we can't just say, oh, freedom, eat matzah once, and we've got freedom forever, that we still have to continue to think about it and how to free our minds. And we can't free our minds quickly, because we have to really consider, what are we enslaved to? So we need that time, just like we need, just like the Israelites needed extra time in the desert, because they hadn't fully integrated what freedom meant.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Just like you need the 10 days of repentance to reflect and to get ready for Yom Kippur, in this case, you need more time after. Isn't it interesting? The one before of Yom Kippur is beforehand reflection, and here it's continuing beyond the act itself of the Exodus. Beautiful. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. George, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, logically, the only thing that we would need to do is the first day. Why the next 6 in the Torah? It's a hook, meaning it's just given to us, and you have to, like kashrut, you just accept it. It's not logical, quote, logical.
So here's where it is interesting, George, and it's an interesting point of view. And I think some rabbis would probably, traditional rabbis, medieval ones especially, might buy into that. But I want us to think about, when did the Israelites really get free? What happened
after the sea?
The seventh day, George.
Yeah.
The seventh day, Kathleen, is the Sea of Reeds when they pass through.
Yeah.
So redemption, freedom, taking out the shackles of enslavement doesn't happen so quickly.
Yeah.
Anything that's such a quick experience sometimes is not that long lasting. So Steve, rather than just focusing on it for 1 day or maybe 2, we've got to take that experience beyond and to talk about how hard it is to take off the shackles of enslavement and really focusing on liberation. Right? It takes a long time to change our habits. Isn't that something? It's a beautiful image. Kathleen, you like that one.
Yes, I do.
And that's
I'm
why
writing it down.
Stan, what would you're gonna be the
We
last
have
comment?
the 7 days of Pesach. We have the 49 days of counting the Omer. So it's really we're double emphasis on time and what it takes to accomplish it, of course, and the giving the Torah, but it's still a process. It's a life process.
That's right. I may another week may do the counting of the Omer, right? Talking about itself. Some of you know that the Omer process, we began the second night of Passover, the Seder. We count the 7 weeks, 49 days from Passover until Shavuot. Tonight is going to be the third night when and it's right. We do it as part of the evening service. It's usually at the end. You're allowed to do it until the night. You can do it through the night. Once you get to the day, you can't recite the blessing. And the hard part about this is, if you forget one night to recite the recite the blessing and to count the Omer, you can't recite the blessing again. Once you forget one day, you're done essentially counting as a mitzvah. Isn't that something, Steve, is a little bit harsh?
But isn't it, you can't cite the prayer, but you can do the count. The next sentence afterwards, you can still say I'm counting, but you can't do the prayer that.
That's right, and you can't recite that. You can't do it for other people.
No.
That's right. You have to be part of it. And that, again, Kathleen, if you want to talk about the diligence that has to go into continuity and how hard that is. And so you, in the counting of the Omer, you have to remember each and every night before the day comes. You can still count it, Stan. You're exactly right. But you lose the mitzvah, the ability to be able to recite the blessing. George, last thoughts.
Yeah, there's a big debate on the Omer. When do we begin after the Sabbath? Whether it's after the first Sabbath within Pesach or after the first day.
Yeah.
It's a big Talmudic,
Yeah.
It's the only holiday, Shavuot, which is not a fixed date. Like
Correct.
the 15th of Nisan is, Pesach. So,
that's right. It's the only holiday in which we count from an earlier holiday.
And we debated when we start counting.
Well, yeah. So it wasn't much of a debate.
Okay.
But it was. And last question, George, for you. What's the other name for Shavuot?
Bikurim. That one?
Okay, there's another one, Atzeret.
Atzeret. The collection.
Because it's the conclusion, just like Shmini Atzeret, it's the conclusion of the period from Passover to Shavuot.
Okay.
And so it becomes the concluding day, and we do count the days. Everybody, it's always a pleasure to study with you. You're fabulous. Maybe I'll see you on Shabbat. If not, remember, Pesach is still here. And if you want to keep that process, you can avoid the chametz and the other things that keep us enslaved. It's not just about not eating bread, but what are the other things that we need to be liberated from in life? And let us all work towards liberation. You all take care, all right?
Shabbat shalom.